It was supposed to be just another quiet evening. I was sitting in my home office, debugging some code, when I heard voices rising outside. At first, it was just murmurs, but they quickly became louder. I looked out my window and saw two men in matching navy vests talking to Grandpa Joe on our front porch. They looked professional, but something about them felt off. Derek Thompson, the taller one, stood with a stern posture, eyes cold, like a man who had spent years in security. His partner, Troy Williams, was shorter but built like a bouncer. He was shifting around nervously, checking his phone every few seconds, as though waiting for a signal. Their vests read Sterling Management Group HOA Enforcement in bold, official looking letters. I had no idea who they were, but it was clear they weren't just another pair of door to door salesmen. Grandpa Joe, my 82-year-old grandfather, didn't take kindly to authority. He never had, not even when he was a mechanic during World War II, fixing engines in the harshest conditions. He was sharp, still doing his own taxes and beating me at chess most nights. He'd lived in this house for 30 years, and no one was going to tell him what to do with his property. I could hear his voice through the screen door, gruff as ever. We never voted for any HOA here. I've lived here for 30 years, and no fancy-dressed punks are telling me what to do with my property. Grandpa's Irish temper flared, but he wasn't backing down. Derek's voice was unnervingly calm. Sir, the violation is for unauthorized driveway repairs. The fine is $500, payable immediately, or will escalate to legal proceedings. He held up a clipboard with papers that looked official enough to fool anyone. Troy just stood behind him, his eyes darting back and forth like he was on edge, waiting for something to happen. I didn't trust them for a second. Grandpa didn't either. I'm calling the police, he said, stepping back toward the door. That's when things went south fast. I saw Derek's hands move toward Grandpa, and before I could react, he shoved him. It wasn't hard enough to make it look like assault, but it was enough to send my grandfather crashing down the porch steps. I heard a sickening crack as he hit the ground. Troy jumped into action, acting like he didn't know what happened. Oh no, he tripped, he said, bending down to check on Grandpa, his voice dripping with fake concern. Call 911! Call 911! I rushed outside, my heart pounding. Grandpa was still conscious, but his face was gray, his breathing labored. The paramedics arrived first, followed by the cops. I tried to tell the officer what happened, that Derek had shoved Grandpa, but with no witnesses and the calm demeanor of the perpetrators, it didn't go anywhere. The officer filed it as an accident during a civil dispute. No arrests, no charges. Becky, my girlfriend, was furious when I told her what happened. Why didn't they arrest them? She demanded, pacing around the living room. I was furious too, but there was nothing I could do. They made it look accidental. They know how to work the system. Grandpa's medical bills piled up quickly. $11,000 for emergency room treatment, x-rays, and overnight observation. And of course, the insurance company was trying to weasel out of covering the costs because it was allegedly part of a civil dispute. I had to take time off work to handle everything, and money was getting tight. That's exactly what these assholes wanted. I reached out to my cousin Mike, president of the Steel Ravens Motorcycle Club. Mike's an ex-Marine, and when it comes to family, he's a rock. The police won't do anything, I told him. They'll be back. And next time, it could be worse. His response was immediate. Family protects family when the system fails. We ride tonight. Within an hour, 15 Steel Ravens were stationed around our house, including Tank Johnson, a 6'4", 300-pound wall of muscle. The presence was intimidating, and it didn't take long for the neighborhood to take notice. Some were nervous, but most were sympathetic. Even Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor, came over with a casserole and mentioned that she'd been getting strange, official-looking mail too. I dove deeper into the so-called Sterling Management Group. The more I searched, the more I found. Their website looked professional, testimonials, legal language. Everything looked legitimate, but something nagged at me about the registration date. It was only 18 months old, around the same time these scams started popping up in other neighborhoods. When I dug deeper, I found out that the address listed for their office was occupied by a dentist's office. No Sterling Management Group. No one had ever heard of them. And then things got even more chilling. The website had a contact page with the same address where Becky worked. Could she have been involved? The thought made my blood run cold. The next day, a woman named Megan Garcia knocked on my door. She looked like an angel sent from heaven. Mid-40s, professional but approachable, carrying homemade soup and a thick manila folder. She told me she was a paralegal and had heard about what happened to Grandpa. "I think I can help with your legal situation," she said with genuine concern. Becky was at work when Megan arrived, and when she saw the legal documents Megan had, the relief in her voice was palpable. Finally, someone who knows what they're doing. Megan was a lifesaver. She gave us legal advice, explained what steps to take, and even set up a meeting with a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like we had someone who knew what they were doing. Someone who cared. But things started to unravel quickly. As I did more digging into Sterling Management Group, I found something disturbing. All of the companies, Sterling Management, Sterling Property Services, and Sterling Legal Solutions, had been registered within the same month. And Megan? She moved to our area just 2 weeks after those companies were incorporated. Coincidence? I didn't think so. Megan wasn't trying to help us fight the scam. She was orchestrating it. I found surveillance photos of our neighborhood, detailed notes on everyone, including Joe. They knew his medical history, his daily routines, even his favorite chair on the porch. Megan had been studying us for months. I wasn't about to let her get away with it. The Steel Ravens stayed on guard, and when Derek and Troy returned demanding even more money, Megan showed up. This time, she came armed with legal knowledge. She tore them apart with specific legal codes and penalties. They were visibly uncomfortable. Derek even tried to claim they were just following company procedures, but Megan wasn't buying it. She stood tall and told them to leave. The next few days were a blur. We had our evidence, bank statements, recordings from Derek, everything we needed to expose Megan. We got a lawyer involved, filed complaints with the state attorney general, and even organized a neighborhood meeting. That's when I got a call from Ellen, one of our neighbors. She told me she'd lied at the meeting. She'd paid $800 to Sterling Property Services after getting a threatening phone call. And when I asked her to describe the voice, she told me it sounded just like Megan's. My blood ran cold. Megan had been running the whole operation. Not just the fake fines, but the intimidation, the surveillance. She'd manipulated every single one of us. It was only a matter of time before we had her cornered. The FBI was already investigating Megan's network, and when they finally moved in, it was game over for her. Her fake companies were exposed, her network dismantled. In court, she tried to play the victim, but the evidence was overwhelming. We weren't the only ones she'd targeted. Elderly people across 6 states had been her prey. When Megan was arrested, it felt like a weight lifted. But the damage she'd done wasn't just physical. My relationship with Becky never fully recovered. We couldn't rebuild the trust Megan had torn apart. Some of our neighbors moved away, traumatized by how thoroughly they had been manipulated. And even after the conviction, the emotional scars lingered. But Joe became a hero. His story about resisting the scam and standing up to the con artists made him a local celebrity. He became the voice of the fight against elder fraud, speaking at events and sharing his experience with others. In the end, the community was stronger than it had ever been before. The Steel Ravens became an essential part of our neighborhood's protection network, and our bond, forged through a shared crisis, became unbreakable. But the scars remained. For every victory, there was a cost. And as for Megan, she was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, but I knew she'd never fully paid for the damage she'd done.